sort of opened up this chapter with our discussion of transactions. Towards the end of that second video in the chapter, I unintentionally gave you a peek into what we would call nested transactions. It was just a mistake, real easy to do. And I want to talk to you about the fallacy of nested transactions. This is an area that a lot of newbies to SQL Server programming fall prey to search engine information, let's just call it that, where somebody will answer something in a forum or in a blog, and it's actually misinformation, yet maybe it's being presented as the right way. Here's the thing. There is not really a concept of nested transactions. Okay? So when we get into the idea of the atomicity aspect of the ACID properties. You remember the last video we talked about the ACID properties here. When we get into atomicity, atomicity specifically says a transaction is an all or nothing event. You have, let's just take, for example, a couple of transactions here, and if you start envisioning how these will work, we have transaction 1 that begins. Okay? And if we had nesting transactions, or if SQL Server implemented nesting transactions like you might think, so transaction 1 starts and is open up here. Transaction 2 starts. Okay. Transaction 2 commits. And then transaction 1, the same thing here. Can't tell. Tran 1 rolls back. What's going to happen to Tran 2? Well, if you follow the atomicity, that says a transaction is an indivisible unit. That means that, for example, you cannot commit transaction 2 without committing transaction 1. If we further expanded this and brought in transaction 3 here, and we said starts, okay, and transaction 3 commits, what's going to happen in a case like this? At the end of this, what's going to happen to transactions 2 and 3? Will this one commit, or will this one have rolled back? Or, well, I'll leave that because I don't want to cover that just yet. We're about to get into that. Okay? You can't have it both ways. You cannot have sub transactions. You cannot commit partial transactions. That's what this would be doing, wouldn't it? Here's the thing. A rollback will roll back all open transactions. Okay. Now there's a big difference between the rollback and a commit. A commit will only pseudo commit any nested transactions. It will not actually commit those. It simply decrements at tran count. You remember we have the select at tran count, which will tell us how many open transactions we're currently having. Like right now, I have no open transactions. If I say begin tran and I run this again, I will have 1. So I'll just put little comments out next to them. If I then say begin tran, and remember the nesting has no effect, right? I mean, that's just for readability. Then we would have 2. Oops, I can't say begin. It's got to be begin tran. A begin is just a control of flow. So here we have 0. Now we have 1 open transaction. Now we theoretically have 2. Okay? When I issue a commit, it will only pseudo commit the nested transaction. Okay? Let me come back up here and say committing nested or inner transactions, okay, is only applies to the last executed begin tran. It doesn't commit all of the transactions, right? A rollback will roll back everything. You could have a tran count of 547, have 547 open transactions, and rollback will roll them all back. A commit only would decrement it to 546. You'd have to commit 546 times to actually commit the transaction. For example, here when transaction 1 starts at tran count equal 1. Here at tran count equals 2. Now we're back to 1. You see, you committed only the most recent begin transaction. Down here, you've started another transaction, and at tran count is now incremented back up to 2. And when you commit it, it's downgraded to 1. And when you roll it back, now you are at 0. So this is a little confusing. There is no real concept of nesting of transactions. In the next video, we're going to talk about what save points are, and that's going to give you some closure on, I'm assuming, some of your questions that you have. But just remember the ACID property of transactions. You cannot partially commit this without committing the entire thing. It's not possible, okay? So a rollback applies to any transaction, but commits will just simply decrement the tran count. So notice that we're right here have tran count open 2 because we ran 2 nested begin trans. If I say commit tran and run this again, how many are we going to have? It's only going to apply to this one, so it's simply going to decrement it by 1. Now if I do this again, now we've got 2 transactions open. If I roll back the tran, how many will be left? 0. Just like we said. So let's talk about save points in the next video.